Welcome to Interchange, a conversation about music and liturgy and all the in-between spaces on the journey. I'm your host, Kate Williams. On today's episode, I am joined by Natalie Pucillo, who's a Master of Divinity student at Loyola University Chicago's Institute of Pastoral Studies, where she combines her interests in Catholic liturgy and sacramental theology, ecclesiology, and trauma-informed pastoral practices. A musician with over a decade of experience serving churches in the Washington, D.C. area, she is especially interested in how communal worship spaces shape connection and responsibility within Catholic settings. Natalie currently serves as the Survivor Resource Intern for Awake, a community of abuse survivors, concerned Catholics, and allies responding to the wounds of sexual abuse in the Catholic Church. As a survivor of abuse by a lay minister, her personal and professional mission centers on naming the impact of harm within church spaces and building communities that make room for truth and healing. Natalie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited for this conversation.
I am too. And I'm so honored that you said yes to having this conversation because it could be a lot, right? But I think it's an important one. And I wanted to say that, I wanted to interview you, especially because March is Women's History Month. It's a celebration of women, and what a better time to talk about the women who are out there doing some really tough stuff right now. Not that women shouldn't be celebrated each and every day, of course. So I do want to talk about you because if there are some ways that you are maybe known to some of our listeners, it might be in relationship to a particular abuser and his works, who we have had lots of conversations about in the last 6 years now. But you are a whole person, Natalie. Tell me a little bit about your background before we jump into anything too scary. Where were you born? Who are you? What do you like? What's up?
And thank you for acknowledging that, because sometimes it's hard to remember that you're a full person, but I am. We are.
Yeah, of course.
So I grew up in the suburbs of Baltimore. I went to Catholic school all my life. Let me back up for a second, because I feel like something that I don't get to talk enough about is that one of my very first memories in life, and certainly my first memory of faith, is of music. My parish in Baltimore, we grew up in the church that my mom grew up at, that my grandfather grew up at, where everybody gets married at this church. And so it was very much a space of community for me within my family, but then also beyond that. And my very first memory of worship is of singing and dancing in the pew with my preschool best friend to Though the Mountains May Fall. Which in retrospect, what a beautiful first memory is the foundation of my life as a Catholic, but also just as a human being and a musician and all of these other parts of myself.
Yeah.
And so I think that sparked something for me, because music has just always very much been a part of my life. We're not really sure where it came from. It wasn't something that my family really participated in.
Really?
Not at all. No, but I joined choir in 3rd grade and band in 4th grade. And from there, I was just in love, and it sparked something in me. And I continued on from there. Chose a high school based on the band program. I was a clarinetist.
Hey, me too. Yay.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
So chose high school based on music. Knew basically from the very beginning of high school that I was going to be a music major in college. That was never really anything that I ever questioned. And so got a degree in music performance in college, graduated, and went pretty much straight into professional music ministry after having done music ministry through high school and college mostly. So yeah, that's sort of the beginnings of Natalie.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know that you're like the trailblazer in your family. I don't know why I just assumed that you were just a part of familial music ministry in church in your whole life, but it's you.
Not at all. And in fact, it was really funny when I started piano lessons in junior or senior year of high school, because I was surrounded by people who, had been taking them since 4 or 5. And here I am, a 17-year-old, trying to figure out where my hands go and what all the keys mean. And so it's very much something that has been mine.
Yeah. What do you think, like, you have these memories, like very formative memories in a formative time in your life when you were at church making music, but what do you think it is that kept you can do lots of things with a music degree, right? What kept you, like, tethered to the church specifically?
It's a really good question because for me, the music itself, like the texts and the tunes, were very important and sort of came second to the act of praying in community
Mm,
and having our body, this embodied form of prayer
yeah,
in community. And
yeah,
that was true for me when I was in third grade choir.
mm,
And that is true for me when I'm leading, church choirs in song.
yeah,
And it's the experience of not only are we singing this beautiful music, but we are doing so in a way that connects us and unites our voices in prayer.
yeah, yeah. I love that you use the word embodied. I feel like I try to use that all the time just to remind myself that this is like an experience which uses my whole body. But I feel like another word that I should try to remember to use more is incarnate. And I like that you know, it's going to seem like I need to apologize to our text and tune writers, but that is secondary to you really like putting flesh on this thing, this relationship. Like it's a way of God being made manifest through you, through your body, through your voice, through your, and yeah, texts and tunes, of course, are important. We care very much about them. But all of that would be, for naught if it were not for the individuals who come to make that music something other than little dots on a page.
And it's all of those things combined too, as well. The text and the tunes are both really important in this
Yeah.
process of embodiment because I love poetry, but it doesn't speak to me in the same way.
Yeah.
And even instrumental music, there's something that can feel like it's missing.
Mm,
But when you have all three of those things together,
mm.
that's where I think something really transformative happens.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of was your style? Are you like an eclectic kind of music listener, or do you have a particular genre that you
I
prefer?
am all over the place.
All over the place. Okay, love it, love it, love it. What was like 17-year-old Natalie's choice?
17-year-old Natalie listened to a lot of Taylor Swift.
Okay.
Listen to some like typical teenager, like emo music, like the sad stuff you cry in your car to on the way home from school, but really juxtaposed with the like brightest, flashiest pop that you could possibly get to.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. In high school, I was such a snob. I'm sure many listeners are like, yeah, nothing's changed. But I was like such a classical music girly that I was just way too good for all of that pop stuff, except like, the guilty pleasure moments when you're like, I can't show up at the high school dance and not know any of the songs. So like, I need to find something. And I think my first like pop music handhold was In Sync. But in fairness, they were really big when I was that age. So
I mean, I feel like that is pretty much the equivalent of me being in love with Taylor Swift. So
yeah,
I think
yeah.
we're on the same page there.
Okay, okay, good. Phew, common ground. Okay, great. Yeah. You are doing such incredible things with your life right now, including being a student of last month's podcast interview of David Dalt, which is such a fun little intersection of, the Venn diagram of people on this podcast is quickly becoming a circle of family here. But tell me a little bit about what you're studying at Loyola.
Sure. And I will say that I I've loved learning from David Dalt in particular, but all of the faculty at IPS they're all phenomenal. So check marks from Natalie. And I'm not just saying that because this is going to be public, like that's really the truth.
You're such a good marketer for them. Is this my time to like plug CTU and just remind people that's where the Pope went to school? So CTU also a good choice, but yes, of course, of course, Loyola.
This is so real though. I forgot this is another moment of common ground where we both did these grad programs in Chicago.
That's
I
right.
love this.
That's right. Chicago for president. Sorry, I interrupted you. You're studying with a wonderful faculty at the IPS.
Yeah. So I'm doing a Master of Divinity degree. And so this is a degree really focused on pastoral ministry. And when I started this degree, it's really interesting actually, because I went back as I was prepping for this conversation and looked at the documents, the letter of intention or whatever it's called when you submit for application, the personal statement. That's what it's called.
Mhm.
And I really said at the beginning, I'm here to learn about how I can be a better music minister. I was working for a church as the director of music professionally at that time. And so I said, this is the goal. How does this degree get me to be a better music minister? And I was 24 at the time, 23 or 24. I was young, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not that I'm particularly old now, but I was younger then and I was less experienced. And so as I started through the program and I could feel myself shifting slightly. And I wasn't quite sure where that came from. except that I knew that it felt like something that I needed to follow. And the shift that I felt was wanting to acknowledge and understand better trauma in the church.
Mm.
And I have this love for liturgy, and I have this love for music ministry, and that has always been at the core of who I am
Mm.
and how I operate within the church. But this is, 2021, 2022. And so we have learned a lot about this composer who we will not be naming.
Mm.
And I have learned a lot more about how he operated in the world, not just in my life and not just in my own experience. And those felt like things that I couldn't ignore.
Yeah.
And it felt like I was telling a lie if I would have ignored it.
Mm.
I had to speak up about it. There didn't seem to be any other option within me.
Mm.
And so I started the way that I think a lot of people who are drawn to grad school start with, let's look at this academically. So I took a class on the theologies of suffering, where basically we had 14 weeks and we took probably more than 14 theologians and just said, what did they say about what it means to suffer in the world and also be Christian?
Yeah.
And that course it was like a light went on in my head. And I went, oh, this is where I need to be. This is what I need to be talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And so from there, I'm so lucky that I ended up in a program, and this was not intentional. This was very much a gift from God, that I ended up in a program where we had courses that talked about trauma and talked about trauma not only in the sense of interpersonal conflicts, but I took a class on nuclear security with Dr. Dalt. And that was a course where it doesn't sound like it has anything to do with, sexual violence, but there was so much overlap. And the ways that we talked about how we as humans heal from the very worst things that other humans can perpetrate,
Now I see
has
it.
been a completely, it has opened my eyes to things that I hadn't seen before. And also I think helps me to put words to how we understand the healing process, to put words to understand how we move forward without ignoring that terrible things have happened, without ignoring that the pain has occurred,
Mm-hmm.
but moving forward in a way that creates space for healing.
Yeah. Okay, there's so much in what you just shared. First of all, just another thank you for trusting me with this conversation and for being just so brave in all the ways that you are having it and continuing to inform yourself while also providing gentle but assertive insistence that the church can do better and must do better. Otherwise it's a lie. It's not the truth. I want to grab a few things from what you just said. First of all, you said that composer who we will not be naming. And I just want to pause there for one moment because that has been a topic and something we've had to decide what to do with, because sometimes hearing his name is like another little, like salt in the wound moment for people who have been harmed. And so sometimes we use his initials, but usually I try to ask what the conversation partner I am currently in front of prefers. And so I want to say that both because obviously through the last 6 years, I consider myself deeply traumatized as well. And so I bristle when I hear the name. But it's not, I want to make sure that people know that it's not a refusal to say the name because of any fear
Right.
of retaliation. It's a decision to not say the name out of awareness and compassion for those for whom hearing it is a trauma. Does that encapsulate it correctly?
It does. And the other thing that I would add to that is that this is something that I go back and forth with a lot within myself because this was a case that was publicized. This is something that people have been talking about, will be talking about. It can feel like if I say his name in connection with myself, then people at least know some sort of baseline about what happened to me. They might not know my story. They might not know all of the details, which I don't want to share all the details, so that's fine if they don't know all of them. But at least there's some sort of understanding about who this is and what generally happened. But through the process of healing, something that has become really important to me is that people don't know, right? Even what's in the news, even what we have put out ourselves is just a piece of what the truth is. And in this journey of healing, I am the important party.
Mm-hmm.
And so people might think that they know things, but that is what people think that they might know is less important than what I express.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so to give me the authority to tell my story in the way that feels authentic and accurate, people don't need to have backstory in order to understand.
Right. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you have shared quite a bit of your backstory, and I'm happy to, at your, with your permission, of course, to link to the places where you have, in writing, talked a little bit about the context in which you found yourself in the presence of something that turned out to be kind of awful. So I'm happy to link to that so you don't have to rehearse any more of that out loud. And also, if you would like an opportunity to encapsulate for frame of reference purposes how you kind of launched into the next steps of your life, the floor is yours to do so.
Yeah, I think let me say something rather than link to it. I think that feels better for where I am right now.
Got it.
If that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So then what shall I say? So when I was in college, it was after my freshman year of college, there were a couple of people at the parish where I grew up who were so supportive of me, that were so on my team in looking to music ministry as something that I could pursue for the rest of my life. There were a couple of us in the music ministry programs who were really highly involved. And one of the guys went to Music Ministry Alive in 2015 and found it a really valuable experience. And so the next year, they sent me and one of the other young men who were involved in music ministry at the parish. At that point, this composer was really just a name in a hymnal to me. He was a very important and substantial name in a hymnal. I'm a Gen Z cradle Catholic. His hymns were the voice of my childhood worship, but I had never really met him. I had never really encountered him. And so I showed up in St. Paul and I trusted.
Yeah.
And that trust wasn't a bad thing, but it was placed in people who did not treat that trust with the dignity that it deserved.
Yeah.
And one of the things that has really been a theme for me in terms of how the things that come up as you continue to process these experiences is that I had a lot of gut reactions right at the beginning of the week that I immediately knew to push down because I wanted to belong. And if I asked too many questions, that was going to jeopardize my place there. That was going to make it too evident to people that I really wanted to believe that I belonged, that I didn't. And when predators are targeting victims, those are exactly the types of vulnerabilities that they're looking for, right? Abuse doesn't work if the victim immediately goes and reports the things that they feel are wrong and the community believes them and accountability is practiced. That's not how abuse flourishes. And I wasn't wrong in the desire to want to belong. That's a very natural thing for an 18-year-old who is showing up in a new place with people whose names they have heard for their entire lives as being special. You want to be special. That
Yeah.
is not a bad instinct. The unnatural thing, the bad thing, was that somebody was able to manipulate an entire environment around causing harm to people who had natural desires.
Yeah. Same, by the way. I don't know if for context purposes, I don't know if people realize I went to the same summer camp years before you and then worked at the summer camp for 2 years after that, but largely because, at the time of my first attendance there, I was an incredibly vulnerable, lonely young person, and for someone to, provide some attention toward me, it was everything. It was everything for me, and I think, there are some ways that I could say that, like, it was saving me in that moment, and I was aware that I was being saved, and that made me feel special too,
Yeah.
that I was worthy of being chosen and feeling saved, and that becomes everything, and when you finally get that feeling of belonging and, like, "Oh, I'm where I'm supposed to be. This is exactly, using all my gifts, and I can be myself, and people understand me," that it makes you so willing to excuse or forgive, what you would consider menial faults in comparison to this great gift that has been bestowed upon you to be included in this environment. And, that's part of the wrestle, right? Like, I got affirmation that I sorely needed at this place. And I got it because was vulnerable. And I had something that, this is going to sound overly crass, and I don't mean that for all of the wonderful people who've been a part of youth ministry too, but like, I had something they wanted,
Yeah.
my youth and talent. And exactly like you said, like, as you're explaining it, I'm thinking like, man, you really just pinpointed that the wealth of responsibility on the shoulders of adults to become safe places where all the children in their life and the young people in their life know that not only can you come and tell me things that are happening in your life, happening to you for better, for worse, that I want you to.
Yeah.
That I want you to come tell me I have a daughter, so, like, I try exercise this muscle every day. I want you to tell me what happened. What did this person say to you? And how did you respond when this happened? And, "Oh, that happened. Did that make you cry? And was it embarrassing to cry?" Or, "Oh, it's okay." Like, all those things, like, the responsibility on the shoulders of adults with young people in their life is enormous, and you should have had not just a place where you could feel like you belong, but a place where you feel like when you come home, you get
Yeah.
to share all of that.
I think when I talk about feeling immediately like I couldn't, I had instincts that I couldn't verbalize. I just remember being in the auditorium on that very first day that I was there, and it was brand new, and I knew one person in the room, and all of the adult volunteers standing around the auditorium and introducing themselves. And how many people said, "Here's who I am. I attended as a youth in these years, and now I'm on the team. And also, I'm a composer, and you recognize my name too."
Mm,
And feeling like that was literally feeling encircled by adults who this was okay, right? Who felt that this was okay. And more than anything that anybody ever said to me explicitly, that is the picture that I see in my mind when I think about what it meant to feel silenced and to feel like I couldn't talk about the things that didn't sit right with me. And I was 18 when I went the first time. Like, it frankly scares me to think about, being younger than that, the high school participants, because
Yeah.
at 18, your brain's not fully formed yet. And I recognize looking back that there were,
Yeah.
that my brain wasn't completely formed yet, but also like I wasn't quite as vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tell me some of, like, if you can remember some of the first red flags that you thought
Mm.
might be something to take note of.
Papa Bear.
And tell me about Papa Bear.
Yeah, it was day one. Yeah, literally in that auditorium, he stood up in the front and he said, "This is, you know who I am. You know who I am. But I would just love it if you would all call me Papa Bear. Everybody calls me Papa Bear." And you could see people around me in the auditorium nodding and going, "Yes, of course, this is what we call him." Adults and children. And I just sat there and went, ew.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. That is we have an ick response for like a reason, right? Like, it's okay. I think sometimes when people ask me, like, what should I do if this happens? How will I know? A lot of people say, I didn't know. I didn't know. And that is, I believe that for a lot of
Yeah.
people, they didn't know.
Yeah.
And I also think there's a lot of people who said, I had no idea. He did kind of give me the creeps though. Like, that's okay to listen to your instinct, your gut reaction. And especially if you hear a young person say, ew,
Yeah.
like you got to listen to that. That's not them being flippant. That's them like, talk about an embodied response to something. It's
Yeah.
coming from like a, "Bleh." No. Yeah. I'm making all kinds of faces and I hope I'm making a little bit of sense too.
No, I think you are, because there's a gut reaction when somebody says something that doesn't sit right with you. And I think that we live in a world where everybody wants to be really sure before we change things, before we make adjustments to our lives and our relationships. You don't want to, do something and then have that be a bad impulse. You don't want to remove yourself from a relationship, for example, and then have that be a bad impulse. But sometimes you have to trust your gut. You have to trust. I believe that all of that is movements of the Holy Spirit. And I think that if the
Absolutely.
Spirit is telling you that something is not right, like, listen to it.
Yes, absolutely. That is a holy message coming through your body.
Sacred the body God has created, temple of spirit that dwells deep inside. Cherish each person, nurture creation, treat flesh as holy that love may abide. Bodies are varied, made in all sizes, pale full of color, both fragile and strong. Holy the difference, gift of the Maker. So let us honor each story and song. Love respects persons, bodies, and boundaries. Love does not batter, neglect, or abuse. Love touches gently, never coercing. Love leaves the other with power to choose. Holy of holies, God ever loving, make us your temples and dwell all we do.
Yes.
And those come in both ways. Like like even as you're speaking about your experience of music ministry and knowing that something is for you, you find a place where you belong. Like my goosebump reaction in my body is, I think, my body's way of recognizing when that spirit has had conversation in another person. So like your body can tell you a lot about what's happening. It can recognize something that's holy. It can send you alarm bells through, we call it a gut reaction for a reason. It's because something in me feels wrong about this. Yeah. That to me is like the first, like, if someone's having a gut reaction to somebody, we should probably like get really curious about that. I think that's the best thing I've ever learned about therapy is like, if you don't understand an emotion or reaction, like just try to get really curious about that. Like, let's just see what that's about. There's nothing wrong with curiosity. In fact, there's a lot right with it.
It's such therapy language, but also it's true and it's helpful.
Yeah. Yes, it really is. Well, one of the things, if I can ask, one of the things I'm curious about is, we're fast forwarding a lot here, but there is so much discourse happening about abuse in general. And we are having this conversation in the context of a lot of revelations and a lot of things still hidden in the Epstein files. And that has been, every day at the top of our headlines. Our church at large certainly is no stranger to abuse, but what I see in our little corner of the world in liturgical music is a lot of people continuing to have the discourse on social media, where people like you and me can see what people think and how they're reasoning through it. And tell me a little bit about what that is like for you.
Yeah, I have joined and unjoined and rejoined a lot of Facebook groups.
Yeah.
One of the things that I see a lot is people looking for some sort, they ask for proof. They're looking for something that says unequivocally they, meaning we survivors, are right and he was bad and there's no question about it. And first of all, I don't think that's a realistic thing to ask. I think that if you are looking for reasons to not believe survivors or not believe women, you will find reasons to not believe survivors or not believe women.
Yeah.
But more than that, we have told our stories, some of us in extremely agonizing details. We have not been quiet about the requests that we're making, which I don't feel like are, the main request, the overwhelming request is remove his music from churches so that we are safe to worship there. Mm-hmm. And I recognize, like I said, this was the music of my childhood too. I recognize that this is an emotionally charged thing to ask people. I personally believe that the safety, the emotional and spiritual safety of our congregations, of the body of Christ, is more important than whether or not we like a song. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of things in our church and in our faith that we have to leave up to faith. We can't know everything. We can't have things proven unequivocally. And so if people who are arguing that I'm looking for, this line to be crossed in order for it to be bad enough.
Right.
That's not something that we can provide. At a certain point, we have to believe.
Like, was he ever convicted? Yeah. That's a big one I see people asking. Like, that's the standard. Like, I'll do something about it if he was convicted in a court of law.
Yeah, which I can't even think. That one in particular makes me a little crazy, because I don't know. Going through a legal process as a survivor, I can't even think about how I want to say this without using a lot of curse words that I don't want to use.
Yeah.
It can be emotionally destructive.
Yes.
It is. I hear from so many survivors, and I've experienced this myself, that the process of reporting, whether that's to the church, whether that's to the legal system, whether that's to the cops, journalists, etc., the reporting process is often more traumatizing than the abuse was itself. Because you get to that point and you go, oh, well, people, it's happened. And so people are going to believe me. You want to believe that you're going to be believed.
Yeah.
And then you're met with a community response. If you are met with a community response that is less than helpful and less than supportive, which I think that there's always people who are more and less supportive than others.
Yeah.
And that damages faith. It damages mental health. That is so painful. And so when I hear people say, like, it's, he has to be convicted and then I'll believe, that is asking a survivor to put themselves through extraordinary pain for you to, for an invisible line to be crossed, basically.
Yeah. And there's a lot of repetition of the idea that someone is innocent until they are proven guilty. But that also implicitly states that you are lying until it's proven you're telling the truth.
Yeah.
So to be calling all these women liars is part of what it's perpetuating misogyny within our faith community, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think it was Hillary Scarcella, who's a part of Into Account, which is the organization that became the safe place where everyone could report about this particular person's behavior. And Hillary keeps reminding us, like, but what if what she's saying is true? Like, you keep saying all of these, like, you keep articulating all these strategies for, like, what if he's innocent? What if this is a terrible conspiracy, from all these women to paint him out to be a monster and it's just totally fabricated? That seems to be a lot of the discourse, what's implied in a lot of the discourse. But she's saying, but yet what if she's actually telling the truth? And in fact, statistics do back that up. Like 94 to 96% of everyone who ever reports sexual abuse is later proven to be telling the truth. That means it's 4% of the time that there's, something is fabricated. And that's just according to statistics that are provable, 4% of the time is going to become your basis for. It's just very protective of people who are accused. And like, I'm interested in the truth. And I understand the trauma of repeating that truth over and over and crossing these, numerous hoops, rings of fire to assert yourself. And maybe it's the same for you. I start to ask myself, is it that they don't believe these women? Or is it just that they don't care?
That's the question, isn't it? I think that, and I'm going to go a little sideways here, but I think it answers your question. There are so many places in the church where I think we still see abuse as something that only happens, abuse in the church rather, as something that only happens to adolescent boys by priests.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is the only picture of abuse in the Catholic Church that we have. And the truth is that the full reality of abuse in the church is much larger than that. I was listening to the Sisters of the Little Way, which are a private group who are intending to become a religious order. They put out an excellent audio documentary. And I think it was Dr. Julia Rubio from Santa Clara University who said really perfectly that women are in society generally the majority of sexual abuse victims. And so it would not make any sense if there were not women who are sexual abuse victims in the Catholic Church. And in the same way, I think that we have spent a lot of time understanding clergy sexual abuse by priests specifically. And the full reality of abuse is that abusers can also be nuns, and they can be lay ministers, and they can be other people who are leaders in the Catholic Church that don't fit into this tiny picture of what we have spent our time understanding and responding to. And that's not to say that those young men are not equally deserving of care and justice and support and a transformed system.
Yeah.
But I think that it does affect the way that when we listen to adult women who were abused by a lay minister, I have referred to that in the past as like the trifecta of being ignored.
Yeah, totally. Say more.
You know, the reporting process, like right at the very beginning, when we were trying to find some sort of path to justice, I feel like one of the things that I heard over and over again was we would go to one group and they would say, well, he was an independent contractor, so we didn't really have authority over him. So you're not really our problem. And then we would go to the next group of people who would say, he was an independent contractor. We had no authority over him. He's not really our problem. And so you could see a through line of people ignoring stories from survivors over the course of decades. These women not being taken seriously because institutions said, well, here's what we think falls within our frameworks of what we need to be responsible for. And you clearly don't fit that. And so hopefully, but you know, hopefully that will make you somebody else's problem and somebody else can deal with you.
Right.
And it wasn't until we found an organization who is not Catholic, and I think that made a huge difference, was going outside of the system.
Yes.
Who would believe us and help mobilize.
Yeah.
And help call for accountability. I think that it is incredible. It is so sad to me that in order to find any semblance of being heard, any semblance of working for accountability over decades, that we had to look outside of the Catholic Church. When the Catholic Church has said, no, we will protect you. When the Catholic Church has made a commitment to the protection of the vulnerable, which we were.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So much of that is lip service without any follow through, right?
Yeah.
I feel that too, as a woman in the church so many times. And it's natural to gravitate towards, I would consider this camp that we went to, a lot of the circles that you and I might be familiar with are fairly like left-leaning circles, talk a lot about progressive ideals, are comfortable pushing for, the advocacy of women's voices and the LGBTQ community and like all of those things like we are naturally drawn to. We also have and should have a natural expectation of follow through on the mission, on the values that you profess to uphold. So the number of organizations that I am affiliated with or involved in or care about, and the number of times that I have asked myself, I thought you were uplifting women's voices. I thought you cared about. And yet it almost seems like being a woman, and I think something unique too about being a woman of childbearing age, as some might say, has this, it is an institutional bushel over the light that we can be. It is absolutely prohibitive of letting I'm getting into a whole nother podcast here, but it is Women's History Month, and I'm telling my feelings as a woman in the church. Yeah, you're bringing up all kinds of memories for me, but one that reminds me too of Natalia Pucillo did a webinar with us shortly after this news came out, and the thing that she said that I cannot shake from my frame of reference is about this idea of an economy of sexual secrets. And it is a lot of Not very Christian behavior. It's a lot of holding knowledge over other people and as a threat. And essentially, a lot of these threats are, some of it is withholding knowledge of harm and then threatening to disclose it. And a lot of it is just, there is something totally normal about you that I know that the church doesn't like so much. And I'm going to, even this person we're talking about, the way that he threatened disclosing other people's sexual orientation. That would be a part of this economy of sexual secrets that we are talking about, that you use somebody's identity or history as a weapon against them. And honestly, amazingly effective if we look at the history of things here. This is bringing up a lot of things for me. Yeah.
And it brings me back to, those feelings that I had getting to the Twin Cities the first time and feeling like questions were bad.
Mhm.
Because questions are, when you get the answers to questions, that's information. And information is the thing that's being used as a weapon
Yes.
in this economy.
Yes.
And so if I start asking questions, and in the process of asking questions about each other, we find common ground that makes those secrets, I'm putting them in air quotes, secrets,
Yes.
less uncomfortable for us to hold, less shameful for us to hold, then they have less power. And these abusers can't weaponize them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's talk about a different kind of knowledge here, because I want people who listen to this episode and who are reading all of your responses in the comments and every other place where survivors are showing up. What are we to do with this information that we have? You've mentioned already, you've asked for a very simple thing, which is to not allow his music to be sung in sacred spaces. And there are a lot of really wonderful people who are working towards that educative approach, including a full analysis of what happens when music makes its way through your body and how that too can be an assault. You can become an unwilling participant in a bodily activity. And let's talk about consent. So you've asked for that very simple thing. What other types of questions do you get, and what is your response?
Yeah. And I do want to acknowledge how many people have advocated for us in this space. I think it's so easy to concentrate on all of the silence and all of the people who are, a little antagonistic in the chat. But there are a lot of people who have worked really hard to make our churches and our music programs safer. And I just want to say that I'm incredibly grateful for that and for those spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Something that has come up for me, something that's coming up as I'm thinking about this, is thinking about transparency in our decisions. So, for example, when you remove the music of an abuser, can you put a sentence or two on your website that states that you've done so and that you stand with survivors? Can you put your worship aid, or at the very least the list of hymns, in the flock note or on the website ahead of time? Because for me and for many of us survivors, the publicly available information can make the difference in whether or not I feel safe enough to attend worship. And I'm not afraid of sending emails ahead of time when I'm going on vacation just to see what's up. But the proactiveness in that transparency shows that not only are you committed to supporting survivors, but you're committed to doing so in a way that makes things easier for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
To borrow a phrase from one of the sister survivors, how do we help survivors? By taking some of the heavy lifting from them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you still get personal pushback? Like either doubting your personal experience or kind of, I guess, robbing you of your credibility in some way as a professional in the industry to, answer the question with a trauma-informed response. Does that make sense?
It does. And so I am not working in music ministry full time right now because I'm in grad school and trying to juggle a million other things. But that was a real barrier for me coming forward at the beginning, was thinking about, am I going to lose my job because I am telling this story that isn't my fault, that I've done nothing wrong, but still looks like a red flag or could look like a red flag? I would say that is something that continues to worry me. I had a job interview 2 years ago now at this point where the priest who was hiring asked me about it in the interview and was like, do you think you can work with me since this is in your background? And I, in the moment, was like, what?
God.
Yeah. Yeah. That walked some angry circles around my neighborhood that day. It's at this point, I feel like I know that I'm telling the truth, right? And so whether people believe me or not, to me, that is less important than it used to be. But there is still a real professional pushback that happens, regardless of whether people believe me or don't, because it looks like a weakness. It looks like, I think there's this idea that all survivors are just so angry at the church. And so if you are acknowledging that this experience took place in your life, then you must be just furious about it at all times. And that's not the case. There are so many of us who continue to work for the church, who continue to be very devoted Catholics, who have remained a part of this church, this institution. I'm not leaving. I'm here for good. I would like to contribute to the church professionally, personally, in whatever ways the church will have me. And I expect pushback because I'm asking hard things.
Yeah. Do you think that systemically that there is something that if we could just remove the floodwaters of, this type of story that would lead to reform, that would lead to better practices, is there something that we could do in the system to make it more possible for, the world that you can dream about to be realized?
Yeah. That's a harder question than it should be. And I think it's because there's no one thing.
Yeah,
right?
That's probably it. Yeah.
And this is not a question that is ever going to be fully resolved, because this is a question that comes up for me. Like, why are you still here? And sometimes that's out of a place of curiosity, and sometimes that's out of a place of judgment.
Yeah.
For me, I'll say that I've said before that it's the Eucharist that holds me there. I believe in the true presence, and that's true. And I used to believe that was the only thing that tied me to the church. And I no longer believe that it's just the Eucharist. I think that my understanding of the dignity of the human person is rooted in the teachings of the Catholic Church. And that affects and influences everything else that I do. Every other way that I exist in this world is rooted in that truth. And so knowing that truth, that one of the things that I love the most about my life and about my perspective in the world, that comes from the church. I think that there's something worth building upon here. But I also know that the world is imperfect and we are imperfect. And so we are always going to be working to build a more inclusive and safe church. I think that even when abuse doesn't exist in your community, you still have to think about how to prevent it from ever happening in the future. So this isn't a conversation that, we have 0 cases now and that's great and we can move on, because we still have to think about preventative safeguarding.
Yeah. I think that's so much of a lot of religion. This is another podcast now, but a lot of religion centers around basically questions of mortality, right?
Yeah.
The fact that we die and then what happens with what we die. I'm sure I would love to be a part of these courses on suffering with you. But I think that grounds a lot of my own questions about religion and a lot of my own answers about why I continue to stay a religious person, a Catholic person, connected to these circles that are so easy to point out the negatives about them. And I think because of my mortality, a lot of my answer comes in thinking about my daughter, the kind of world that I want if I die today.
Yeah.
What kind of world do I want my daughter to know and to inherit and to become a part of? And so there are some days when I not at all giving you some kind of stylized answer just because I want you to be happy with me. But some days my answer to the question of why I stay Catholic is because of you. Because I love that my daughter can hear through the lens of stories she's been told her whole life about prophets and holy women and resurrection. I want her to have other examples of Catholic women who can show up, who can be around. Like she can find examples like you that make sense of the stories that she's always known and she's still growing into knowing. And they apply it to the world today in a way that says Jesus is here. And because we have this gift of communion, we work in communion to hopefully help bend that arc of time towards something a little more just, something that looks a little bit more like the kingdom. And it's because of my mortality that I care when I see people like you. Yes, I care about you too. Selfishly, it's because I need this for what comes next. That's my preventative, is hopefully conversing with and fostering a platform for other women, other holy people, other good advocates and allies, people who can retell that story of beatitudes and of radical welcome, and who can sell that dream of heaven in a way that's like real. And, we can actually take these real steps to make that happen. That's why I care, because I don't know how many more days I have, but I'll be damned if I leave nothing better to look toward for my kid and her friends. And,
Yeah. We are all better off when we tell the truth.
Yeah.
When we tell the truth of what it means to be human, and that involves good stories and bad. And if the stories hurt to listen to, that's because they're painful. They should hurt. And it's okay that they hurt to listen to.
Mhm.
They're not the only stories that matter, but neither are the good ones. They all come together. Our whole lives come together as integrated people. And that is the truth that sets us free.
Yeah. Amen to that. Natalie, I'm so grateful for your time here today. I believe you. And also, I care very much. And I'm so grateful that you continue to find a way to get up every morning, forgive the church, and then go about doing the work of the church. You're an inspiration to me, and it's a privilege to know you. I'm just going to ask you to pray with me before we go. In our tradition, we begin in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. God, you are a good God. And you have given us this very good gift of a body that we use to bring in its fullness, to offer you our most exuberant praises. A body that informs us, that protects us, that accompanies all our daily living. You have given us these beautiful homes. May we always treat our bodies, the bodies of all of your children, with love, care, respect, dignity. And may we always have the insight, the fortitude, the humility to believe what our bodies are telling us. And in turn, to believe the words that we hear, the stories that are shared. Help us. Stay close to us. Pick us up when we fall, because we will. Stay so close to us that we know that these precious bodies, so beloved, too often betrayed, are never alone, that you are always with us. We ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
I'm so grateful to you, Natalie. I'm so glad you are here. This has been another episode of Interchange, an exchange of ideas and experiences and hope-filled embrace of all that has been and all that might be as we continue singing our lives back to God.